They wanted to sell the whole company for 3.5 million, and we ended up getting him that just for the domain name.
All right, I got Brian Harbin with Grit Brokerage. Brian, how you doing, man?
Hey, Brooks, excited to be here. I know you're not on the bike today,
Yeah,
but looking forward to catching up with the drums in the background, right?
yeah. No, yeah, I appreciate it, man. Yeah, the Biz on a Bike videos, which I think is how Maureen, who works with you, found me originally, was riding on a bike, going through my thoughts for podcasts and videos, which is like one of our segments that we do. So, nah, it's cool.
I love that.
Eh,
Yeah, some of my best thinking is done while I'm walking, so I know you probably feel the same about running your bike.
100%. So the bike, also shower ideas are the best. It's when you're doing something that like your brain can just relax. That's when the best ideas flow in for sure. And that was my inspiration for doing the bike stuff was exactly that because I can just kind of cruise. And yeah. But we're not here to talk about bikes, man. We're gonna talk. We're gonna talk about domain name investing. But like I want to. So we'll touch on the future of domains, like how folks can get started at domain name investing, um, the importance of a great domain, like all this stuff. But we've got time to get to all that in our conversation. But I'm excited because I'm excited to talk with you because you are like you're the man. You're a top domain brokerage, and so I want to learn about that. Like first, like how in the world did you get into domain names and why? Like what's your backstory there?
Yeah, it's really interesting because I'd been in insurance for about 14 years at that point, and well, about 10 years into the insurance business, but I knew it was something I didn't want to do long term. It was a great business, insurance is, I ran a large organization but just requires a lot of travel and not super exciting and not really something that was like mine per se. Like I ran kind of within a larger company. So a lot of things that I couldn't control. So I just really wanted something on my own. And actually, I know your background is in real estate. So
Yep.
I actually, and my dad was a contractor and I saw him buy homes and fix them up and rent them out and sell them. And so I actually had some money sitting in a Roth IRA that wasn't really doing anything. And I was like, well, I pulled some money out and invested in my first rental property and made some spread between the mortgage payment and the rental. Yeah, so I just really loved real estate and had a couple properties, and so that was kind of something I was doing on the side. But yeah, in 2014, a buddy of mine had told me about a domain name that he had sold for six figures, and I was like, wow, I had no clue that this whole industry even existed. And like most domain owners, he's not a salesperson by trade. He just happened to be sitting all these domains, and my whole background is in sales. So I said, hey, well, I'll manage all your inbound leads, help you negotiate the best possible sell price, and get paid a commission. So that's really how I got my start, just kind of managing his portfolio. And then as I started doing deals, would just get referrals and was just basically working at insurance by day, and then at night I'd come home and sit in my office and do domain stuff. And then in 20 and really just kind of plugging along. I mean, it was very part-time money. But I was fascinated by it. I was just learning a ton, watching a lot of domain Sherpa, learning about all the trademark laws. And then 2018, a guy that I helped buy a $2,000 domain name said, hey, will you help me sell ice.com? And he actually owned a jewelry company that he was operating off of it. And they wanted to sell the whole company for 3.5 million. And we ended up getting him that just for the domain name. So after I got it under agreement, within 48 hours, we had it sold for full price for 3.5 million and sold it to the owner of the New York Stock Exchange. So they went from theice.com to ice.com. And then, since the domain industry is pretty small, that sale really helped put my name on the map and really gave me confidence like, hey, this is something that I can turn into a career. And then shortly after in 2020, went to a domain conference that Rick Schwartz put on in Nashville and met Michael, and he's like, hey, can I come work with you? I was like, let's do it. So really just been growing it ever since. So yeah, full time since 2020. And um, now there's seven of us that work at Grit Brokerage, and yeah, just absolutely love it. My oldest son is a junior in high school and he wants to be a domain broker. And so he's going to Elaine Academy course. And so, yeah, it's just, it's a fascinating business.
So many questions. I will going forward probably start interrupting you, but I didn't want to do that this early on because I was like, that's super rude because we're just getting to know each other. Uh, but that story is so cool. The ice.com to ice.com, very like Facebook ish, right? Like the Facebook, purchase facebook.com. That's like, I actually remember when Facebook launched, I was in college at Auburn University, and my entrepreneurial buddy told me, he's like, dude, like we were in the library. He's like, you got to check out this website, man. It's called thefacebook.com. I remember being in the computer labs looking around one day and like everyone was on this website. I was like, this is going to be big. That was like 20 years ago. It's kind of crazy. So ice.com, 3.5 million. Like one of the things I wanted to ask you was, uh, like, what's one of the biggest sales you've ever done? That's probably a giant sale. I don't even know if you're allowed to tell me about, sales specifically. Obviously that one you can, but, that's a huge sale. Like for people listening, like, wow, you can potentially sell, this digital asset for millions of dollars. Um, how did you come up with the value? I feel like at that time you were probably new-ish to the industry. Like how in the world did you decide what that thing was worth?
Yeah, that was really, and that's cool that you went to Auburn, by the way. I went to Georgia myself. I spent a lot of time at
No.
Auburn, actually
Dogs, man.
in college as well. So, great university, fun town too. But yeah, so with ice.com specifically, that was really just the price they needed. They were looking to exit the company, and it was owned by a handful of people, so they really just wanted to liquidate it and move on. And that was really just the price that they needed. I think they had paid 7 figures for it, so that was just the number that they needed. And, the thing is too, when you're gonna approach the most logical end user buyer, especially a guy that's a billionaire, it's like you got one shot. If you try and price gouge it and sell him 10,000,000, like, he'll never reply ever again. So you've really gotta have it priced right. And, yeah, we did sell story.com last year, for actually more than that. But, and yeah, you see, domains selling for, 8 figures even last year as well. But yeah, it's, um,
Did you say
the,
story like STORY? Story?
yeah, story.com.
Oh, wow. Cool. Yeah. That's a cool one. Uh, yeah. So, yeah, the people watching this, so what I've found is that, like, domaining is it's a wide path of people, from professional down to people that are just, like, trying to sling and make a couple of dollars. And I think everyone maybe has this, like, aha moment. Like, you had your aha moment when you were in insurance and your buddy, told you about this domain that he sold. That was, like, your light bulb moment. Uh, mine Mine was about a year ago, just when I accidentally sold a domain name. I didn't even know what I didn't even know what it meant when I clicked the button to put it on a marketplace. Know what it meant, and I forgot all about it. Like 8 months later, I got an email that honestly I thought was spam, to be honest, because it was on GoDaddy's platform, and just it was kind of antiquated, like email looking, and I just didn't remember it. I was like, this has got to be spam. Anyway, so that was
Source Vegan name, right?
yes, yeah. It was
Oh, it's a good one.
It was a real estate domain, and I didn't know it had value. You know what I mean? That's, like, not the way I was thinking at the time. But now looking back, it's like, well, of course. Like, of course it had value. Like, it was forefrontre.com was the domain name. It was a previous like, literally, so I have a LLC, an entity called Forefront Real Estate. Uh, that was our domain, but we weren't utilizing the domain. We had some email addresses with it. So I was like, well, I don't even need it anymore. Like, after I renewed it for a year or two, I was like, I don't even need this thing. Cool. Let me click this button if I can sell it. Um, so that was kind of my light bulb moment that got me saying, wait a minute, like, let me start investing in these things. So so I went out and, like, bought 100, doing my own research, finding 100. Now I've gotten to a hundred, but I'm kind of realizing that, I need that's not enough. Like, at least in the like where I am in my beginning investment phase, I'm like, this has got to be a minimum of 500. I think. And I would actually love your feedback on this. But now my new target is, okay, I've got to get like 500 and maybe 1,000, like, names that I think are good, that someone obviously will buy, and that have good utility. And then of, like, sell through rates. And I'm curious to hear kind of what you know about that, and people that have portfolios and, like, sell through rates. Um, that's kind of my new strategy, is to kind of grow to this, like, 500 to 1,000 numbers. Obviously, for me, I'm not going to be able to invest in high end price domains. I'm gonna be, like, hand registering and, like, finding deals, like, in the cracks, man, which is what I've always done in real estate. I've always found the deals in the cracks. Um, what are your thoughts on some of that?
Well, I think for me, I see it from a lot of different angles. I mean, first of all, I would say in terms of sell through rate, yeah, like you said, if you have 500 to 1,000 domains, the sell through rate on domain names, if you're just a straight up investor and waiting for people to come to you, it's pretty low. You're talking like 1 to 5%. So if you've got 1,000 domains, you might only sell a handful each year. So for a lot of people, that's definitely going to be very part-time money, depending on what the sale prices are. Now, I will say this, and I see this all the time. Like, and just to clarify, as a domain name broker, I've never gotten into domain name investing. I mean, it's really a full-time job to be a domain name investor and be on auction sites and figure out what to. So for me, and the other thing, when I got started, as a broker, there's no risk, right? So I wasn't investing any of my own money. It was basically just investing my time. And if I sold something, I get paid. If I didn't, I didn't. So um, that was for me what made sense. Now I do own domains as building a brand, right? So I own, outside of Grit Brokerage, we have some other businesses like grit.org and summer sports camp and podcasts and things like that. And I actually bought harbin.com. That's my last name.
Oh, nice.
My son to use for his college applications. So there's domains that I definitely invest in that. So I see it from the standpoint of an end user in terms of somebody who wants to buy it, hold it long term, to be able to use it and build something on it. Um, but I will say I spend a very good chunk of my day, get probably 100 200 emails a day of people like sending me a list of domains. And, 99% of them are just domains that really aren't worth anything. I mean, and I'd go so far as saying that, that's where GoDaddy makes, and, these registrars make millions of dollars of, I guarantee if you had to take a breathalyzer test on GoDaddy to buy domains, their revenue would drop tens of millions of dollars. Just like you said, people get these, they've had a few glasses of wine or a few beers and they like get all these harebrained ideas and they go spend, a couple $100 on 10, 15 domains. But then you think about, okay, well, in a year, you're going to have to pay, the renewals keep going up. So you're paying $15 a renewal. So if you've got 1,000 domains, your overhead right there is 15 grand. So, if they're domains that aren't really going to sell for the long term. And the other thing too, I would say this with hand registered domains, you think about, let's say we could agree that the internet's been around since the late 80s. Now, you're talking 40 years. So in 40 years, if nobody has ever wanted in the entire world has ever wanted to pay even $10 for that domain, what makes you think all of a sudden it's going to be worth 10x or 100x that amount? So you really have to be smart, and the people that do that, they really follow specific trends and need to know which keywords are going to be important. So, like I said, it's a full-time job from that standpoint. I personally think that, if you tie it to real estate, right, you could build a whole portfolio of, call it Section 8 housing. I'm not saying it's a bad thing to do. At the same time, it's lower point of entry. The returns are typically going to be smaller. Um, more headaches a lot of times, right? Whereas if you have a model where you want to buy a house that's in a good school district, that's going to get good tenants, that, is going to increase in value. Those are really what you're looking for. So for me, I think I'd rather see somebody, if you're going to have, instead of having 1,000 domains, I'd rather see somebody get 5 to 10 domains that you are fired up about that really, and to
Mhm.
me, Brooks, this is the key that it's a good domain is if it's something that you lose sleep over, right? If it's something
Mm.
whereas like you see the domain and you're like, wow, this thing really has a lot of potential. And that's how we know we have a buyer on the hook. If we reach out to a company and if it's the CEO and it's basically their calm version that's a lot shorter than what they have, and they're like, oh, it's too expensive. But then a few days later, they come back and they say, hey, well, what about this? You know that they've been sleeping on it and they've lost sleep thinking about, wow, this domain is a game changer. They've been telling their friends, "Hey, do you think I should buy this domain?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, that'd be killer." So, I think less is more. You know, I'm sorry. This is one of the point I was going to mention with that. So we work with a lot of the sales we do go to high end investors, people that'll invest, 6 figures in a good, oneword.com, and really, for them, that's a great model because, just like in real estate, you make your money when you buy it, right? So if you get a good deal on it, then you can afford to sit on it for 3 to 5 years and potentially get 10x on it. So I think that's really kind of the model you want to shoot for of like, because that having 1,000 domains, it's like you're continually have to go through and reprice them and figure out what to keep and what to hold, and you're buying new ones,
Mhm.
and so it just can be a lot to manage after a while.
Yeah, that's so interesting. It's so interesting to me how it is an exact parallel to physical real world real estate. It is literally the same industry in a virtual world because there's 100 ways to get involved in real world real estate. And I'm finding the exact same here, right? Different types of properties, different ways to invest, different strategies, flipping, long term holding, whatever. That's so interesting to me. I think what I'm doing, at least this is where I am now. I think what I'm doing is like entry into the industry as a way to try to generate cash flow and then maybe move up into higher quality domains. At least this is my thought process right now. And because I'm connected, I've gotten really into I'm gonna put quotes here, like a domaining community, but on like Twitter, on X, there are like my background is marketing and SEO, but there are like I was following 50 or 60 people in that industry. Um, in this domain world, like I think I have a list of like hundreds. It's like more than 200 now. There are so many people talking about this and like have different strategies. And some people, do some outbounding and outreach. Some people just like literally just list on marketplaces and passively sell. And I think that's super interesting. I think, at this point in this conversation, for people watching to know that like my strategy is multi-pronged, and one of them includes having good enough quality domains that a broker would want to work with me. And so like you guys actually have, I think it's three of my assets that are listed. Let's see. I had them, so I was like, "Hey, if anybody wants to buy them right now, cardfanatics.com, Starview Realty, mountaincresthomes.com." Obviously, the real estate world. There's a couple of them from real estate, and yeah, I think having a broker is a really cool part of that strategy because you are like, just like in real world real estate. Yeah, you can sell your house on your own, but the majority of home sales actually go through a professional, a real estate professional. So for you guys, it's like hiring that professional that has contacts, has connections, and understand like knows values of things. And so that like for me, that is like in my personal future in this. That's definitely going to be like a piece of my strategy. Um, do you think that, are the main sales that you guys are doing, is it or let me ask this, the largest sales, is it to companies that are shortening names or not necessarily? Is it like all over the map for companies that are wanting to buy from you guys?
I would say the majority of our large sales are gonna be, companies that we're reaching out to where we're selling them a better version of their domain name. So for example, like, last year, young.nl, we sold them young.com. Right? So they went from a country code extension to upgrading to the .com. A lot of times, it's a startup company that, has a budget and they're looking for like a good one word .com and a certain. Now we sell domains ranging from $250 up to the millions. So there's everything in between. So we do a ton of deals in the 2000 to 50,000 range as well. Um, but consistently doing 6 and 7 figure deals as well. But one of the things I wanted to touch on too, Brooks, I think for people getting started, this is why I think when you are buying domains, the research is so important. In terms of, let's say you see a good domain that's at a fair price, you want to research, okay, what companies out there would want to buy it? You really have to think about it from an end user perspective and say, okay, if I'm somebody that has a company, am I going to be excited about this domain? Is it something they could potentially lose sleep over? Um, you can't just have one prospect. You need to have multiple prospects because if that one prospect's not interested, then you're going to be sitting on it for a long time. Um, are there a lot of companies that have a trademark around the term? Are there funded companies in Crunchbase? And now, even with that, one of the biggest mistakes I see people make, Brooks, is they see a domain like, oh, this company needs to buy this domain, but they don't understand the trademark So, for example, if there's a term that a company has been operating around and they have a trademark for it, and you go and buy a domain and try and sell it to them, they can sue you and take that domain from you. And it'll cost $5,000 to file a UDRP. But if you get sued and lose, then that's going to stay with you. And so that's where having even as there's a lot of people that having a broker just even as somebody to call people just to call me to consult. I'm not saying, hey, call me anytime you want to ask me a whole bunch of random questions. At the same time, there's a lot of free advice that I'm willing to help people with. I can't tell you how many Kamala and Trump domains I get over the last couple of years of like, no, you're not going to be able to, make money off of a Trump domain. They will sue you and steal it from you. And so, but I don't have time to explain that to every single person that does it. But that's a huge thing that makes a big difference. It's unfortunate that people are able to go hand register domains that are in trademarks, because then they're going to be stuck with them, but they're just not sellable. And that's a key thing that really can is not an avenue to make money.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. So would that be a part of your always buying criteria? Always check trademark of anything, even if you think it's like a generic term. Should you still like check trademark? I guess or
Yeah, I think
search.
it's important at the same time if there's multiple trademarks. I mean, so for example, I'll use young.com. I mean, it's very rare. So there's that someone will try and sue. Um, but like young, there's like, I don't know, probably 30 different trademarks out there. There's, even more than that, companies that use young. One of the companies that we reached out to tried to sue my client and take the domain. Obviously they lost. And not only did they lose, my client won, but also the panel ruled in the fact that the people that sued were at risk of an RDNH, which means if you sue somebody with intent to basically take a domain and you don't really have a case, then they can rule a RDNH, reverse domain name hijacking. Now, obviously, my client didn't pursue that route because we sold it to somebody else. But so understanding the trademark laws is important. You can't just reach out to one prospect too. I mean, that's the other thing is that if you've got to reach out to a lot of people. You've got to list it publicly for sale and do things that make sure that you're protected and you're protecting your client. And again, that's the reason it's helpful to at least if you're not using a broker, have a broker that you can reach out to that you can ask and say, hey, this is my plan. What do you think? And because attorneys are going to want to charge you, and that's fair enough, and they should. But being that we've kind of seen how all these situations play out, it's just helpful to have, forums are great. I had a lot of great mentors and still have a lot of great mentors in the business that I'll call and ask questions to. And so it's a very welcoming community, as I'm sure you've probably already started to see, and people are wanting to help other people. And so I think just having a good group of people doing something similar that you can bounce ideas off of and get advice is always helpful in anything you're doing, not just domain
Heck yeah.
names.
Yeah, I totally agree. So what would have happened in the RDNH? So like they would have the opportunity to basically is that like a countersuit kinda? Is that kinda that
Exactly, you could file for damages and everything else. Um, it's not common that they would do that, but, for the company that sued and lost, it's not a good look for them because if they ever try and to, to trademark or defend one, that's already out there in the universe for them.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Alright, so earlier you were talking about, like, who to reach out to, the companies. You said after you decided, price. So how do you or how should or just some ideas on how people could or should come up with fair prices? Because obviously, there's like, and I'd be curious, like maybe tools or resources or anything that you might use because there's a lot out there. But prices, it's almost like again physical real estate. Beauty's in the eye of the beholder, but of course you have like past sales equal potential appraisals, potential value. But yeah, I'm curious how you see that and go about that.
Yeah, so there's a number of tools we use. I mean, at this point, we see and price so many domains and know what things sell for. And we've reached out to pretty much every single possible vertical out there to know what companies will pay or what industries are willing to pay for domains and whatnot. Like, for example, like food and beverage, they don't spend money on domain names, right? It's like, when you buy a soda, you're not going to their website, right? You're just going to pick it out at a store and see it. Um, there's some industries that just don't value domain names in that way. So that's important to know as well. But I think, reading like DN Journal is great because they post every 2 weeks, like all the recent sales. You've got sites like Name Bio, which is really good. That shows you can type in a domain and see all the different price ranges of what things are selling for. So tracking it, those would be like in real estate, those are considered like comps. Um, the online evaluation, GoDaddy kind of prices things like 5,000 and below. If it's worth more than 5,000, they're usually not a very good. And I think they'll even say if it's priced over 15,000, they don't even quote it for you. Uh, Estabot is pretty decent in that way, but you've really got to look at a variety of different tools. But I think looking at like name bio would be good because it's going to give you what other similar domains have sold for, that you can use as like kind of a barometer. And, you can always price a little bit, higher to leave room for negotiation or commission, depending on, where you're listing it but yeah, those are a
Yeah.
few tools we use.
No, those are great. Okay, yeah, those are good. Question: where did Grit Brokerage? Where'd you get the name Grit from? Grit and Grit Brokerage. How'd you come up with that?
Yeah, so, my when I was a freshman in college, I sold educational books door to door, did that all through college,
Nice.
recruited,
Cool.
people to do that, and, we're always looking for people, that worked hard, that fall through what they said they're gonna do, and then when I was in insurance, it was like I built an agency, and it was like I did a lot of recruiting over the years, and I always knew I always the way I used to say it is my threshold for misery is so much higher than other people. Like that was kind of the way I described it, is like my ability to withstand misery, which, cold calling sales is probably the hardest industry out there. I'm sure on but when I came across that word grit, it was my dad had actually sent me like a newspaper article about it. I'm like, this is the word I've been looking for. And I was like, anything that I ever do moving forward is going to be named grit. So Grit Brokerage, actually, that was a hand registered domain at the time. And so yeah, I paid $10 for that. And then later on bought grit.org and it bought a whole bunch since then as well. But yeah, all things grit at this point.
Very cool. No, I like it. I want to hear the backstory. I have a local entrepreneur friend that uses the word grit a lot in a lot of the stuff that he talks about. And I think it's a cool word, and like what it stands for is it's pretty powerful. Like when you explain it and talk about it, like what it means. And you had the exact thought and definition of, as the way he talks about it too. So that's cool. That's super cool. All right, all right. So many quick. All right, let's switch gears. AI domains, AI technology and domains, not like AI domains like .ai. I won't really even go there, although that's its own thing. But like, well, no, open-ended question. AI could be .ai domain names. It could just be the technology of AI in the industry. What do you see, or what are you interested in, or like what piques your interest there?
Well, so we started selling a lot of dot domains, like one word dot domains, probably 3, 4 years ago. That's the other thing that's really interesting about the domain industry is we see trends before everybody else does. Because,
Mm,
I don't know if you saw, like, for example, the Squarespace commercial on the Super Bowl, right? And the guys throwing out laptops is like
yep.
everything starts with a website. Well, technically, you need a domain first to start the
Need
website.
that look,
So
baby.
for all
Need
the
empty
people
lot.
building
Yep.
websites and companies, they need to buy a domain name. So that's one thing that's really cool about being part of this industry is we see all these trends. We've seen it coming for a long time. I mean, we were talking about blockchain, in crypto 5, 6, 7 years ago, domain conferences, things like that. So we see all these trends, and there's an interesting overlap there with the crypto guys and the fact that a lot of them are also domain name investors in these other types of digital assets. So there's an interesting overlap there. But with .ai, I think obviously a ton of startups. That the .ai sales of last year went kind of crazy. I mean, one word .ai domains are selling for 6 figures, and really the extension is doing well. And I know recently they moved over from Anguilla, so it's a lot more of a secure extension now as well. But I think the technology behind it is it's exciting to see. For me, I always am kind of a late adopter in terms of kind of, hey, let's wait and see how this stuff plays out. I think
Mhm.
the tools that are there, um, I say wait and see in terms of like how it's going to affect our day to day and the things that are to come of it. But I think just from the standpoint of where it's really unique is there's so much information out there. And I think the ability for AI to help kind of condense that for us is super helpful. And so the amount of time that it saves and the efficiency that it helps us with in our day to day life is going to be significant. I think one of the challenges we have is, there's just going to be more and more information out there. So being able to filter like what's important and what's not. And then the challenge, if you're a business owner, is like, okay, with all that information out there, how are you going to make sure that people can find you and get to you? So I think yeah, it'll just be kind of a wait and see how, in addition to Chat GPT and how we can use it in our day-to-day lives, some of the technology, I think some of the things with medicine and things like that will be helpful. But I think as business owners and people that operate, domains and websites and businesses in general, of like, okay, well, how are you going to get through all that additional information and noise so that people can get to you? And I think, we've seen some of the changes already with the Google search and how people are finding information. And I think that's something we'll have to kind of wait and see. Um, and I think the people that are the most able to adapt and pivot and move and adjust with that are probably going to succeed. And I think, have you probably seen with YouTube and video? I mean, my kids don't watch cable anymore. They watch YouTube. And so that's an interesting source of information for people and where they do their search and get their information. So, definitely staying on top of watching these trends and where everything is going to go.
For sure, for sure. So I was just about an hour before we hopped on this, I was chatting with my video editor. He lives in Argentina, and anyways, that's not even that doesn't even matter. Well, I love a distributed workforce, but we're talking about AI, and I told him I was like, look, man, we were talking about a certain content that I may put out, and he said, yeah, if you want to like like upset people, I was like, no, no, no. I was like, I'm not looking to upset people. I was like, conversation is good. And I said, "Look," I was like, basically for certain things, I was like, either I stay in the cave and hang out, or I go out of the cave and take a hike. And like, I was like, my goal is to go hiking and just try not to get eaten by a bear. Is what I told him. And that's man, that's the way I'm living. Like literally, I'm leaning so hard into AI and AI tools, and every day I'm not necessarily testing new things, but it's a part of my daily workflow. It's a part of what I'm doing for domaining. I mean, I'm using it. I'm using it to think and to expand like what I could do on my own. And yeah, so I'm in the camp of I'm in the camp of a utilizer of the technology for sure. So I'm not going to go into the .ai thing, but I don't. I guess I'll do my own research on that unless you think we should talk about that. But like, yeah, the fact that it was a country code and I knew it had recently changed, and when it was the country code, I remember asking a buddy of mine that like invested a lot in college, bought a ton of domains. I was like, are we relying on on like these countries' government? I was like, are all these AI companies relying on that country just allowing you to use these, that TLD, that extension, .ai? Like what if something happens there? I don't know if that's something we should touch on or just not worry about. But you tell me on that.
I just say it's something to keep an eye on with your. And I would say .ai is not a concern, but you are seeing it with .io. At the British territory, there is a little bit of issue there, and so I just tell people if they're we just helped somebody last year go from Swift Connect.io to SwiftConnect.com, and they're a massive company that does millions and millions of revenue, and for a company like that, that's a big deal. So I think helping people understand is that, not that data is bad and you need to, but you need to have a backup plan, right?
Yeah,
And you
yeah.
need to have some other options out there. And I think that's the key too, in terms of like, that's what I love about building a brand as a business owner is that I see domain names from a different strategy where it's like, you just want to kind of collect as many things as relevant to you as possible so that not only you have if all you do is just point those domains to your site, it's kind of like, the more roads pointing to, your central hub, the easier it is for people to get to you. Not only that, you're also kind of playing defense and preventing other people from coming in and building a brand around it. Uh, and diversifying on media. One of the things that we've been seeing a lot of too is these people that have a massive brand on social media you don't own that relationship with your client. If you have 2 million followers on Instagram, well, they can shut you down any day and those 2 million followers are gone. So you need to have that direct relationship with those clients. And the way to do that is to have a domain, have a website, have people go to your website, collect emails, send out newsletters, and that way you can have a direct connection to your clients to sell them your product or service. But just because they follow and like you, like your stuff, that's not a safe and secure way to build it. I mean, look what happened to TikTok. All of a sudden, poof, it's gone. Um,
That
well,
that's a yeah, exactly. It's in limbo, right? Like like there, its future is not guaranteed, and I think that did make a lot of like a lot of uh creators on the platform like hopefully wake up to that. But the point you just made is an interesting one. I hadn't really even thought of that. Like that potentially you could be selling a domain name to a brand that makes a lot of revenue but doesn't even have a website at all. Like that's pretty interesting to me that like a creator, like literally an influencer creator may be a potential customer for buying a domain that doesn't even like they're not upgrading necessarily. Maybe they just didn't even have the brand in the first place. Like that's pretty interesting. Interesting buyer.
and one thing, Brooks, I was going to mention too, as a domain investor, let's say you do sell a domain to a company, right, that reaches out to you direct. And I think too, I personally think that, instead of listing domains on like a third party, site where they sell it for you, I think having just a contact page on each domain that you have where people can contact you directly. That way you are personally having that conversation with the buyer. Because then let's say you help them buy the domain name and you're like, well, I can help you get your social media handles, or I can help you get some other domains to be relevant to you. Now you can actually build a relationship with that person, that company, and help them acquire more things. And they can refer you to other people that, hey, can you help so and so? I mean, that's how I built our entire brokerage is off, you know, doing helping people and then referring you to their friends. So I think you can actually parlay being a domain investor um, to actually building a pretty good network of being an expert in domains and digital assets. Because, like I said, it's not even just one domain name. It's kind of this whole. I like to call it a digital fortress around your brand, right? It's more than just one domain. It's keywords. It's social media handles. It's all these other things that you can help people with and really position yourself in a way as being a digital expert.
That that's an interesting argument for me to potentially do that. Like I just wrote that down. That's a great idea. Like my thinking was okay. Uh, where I am currently in my business is like my plate's completely full, just like with all kinds of projects, and so it's like um I don't need to be the communicator on the domains that I own. Hence why I need to partner with smart brokers like you guys. I need to maybe use some marketplace stuff. But your argument of why to try to have that conversation is really interesting, and it's something I hadn't thought of yet. And so, thanks for that. That's like food for thought on a reason to directly try to have that communication with potential leads.
And
That's cool.
kind of along those lines too, Brooks. So it's like where, I think you get our monthly newsletter with all the different domains that we're selling.
Mm.
There was one several years ago, a guy like yourself that's kind of a domain investor, and he had sold one of his domains to a guy in the knife business, and we were selling knife.com. And he was like, hey, can I put this in front of the guy? And so we kind of worked out a commission split that, hey, if this guy bought it, that he would get paid. And so if you kind of build relationships in a certain industry and then, wow, a really killer domain comes along and, hey, I happen to know the guys and the gals that are representing this domain name. And then that was a pretty good payday for just basically a referral, at that point. So you just never really know what doors are going to open. And so I think just saying yes and being open and being willing to help people, it's incredible how, I mean, I think that's one of the things is positioned us really well is like we're just nice to people, right? Because it's a domain in the domain industry, people a lot of times it's like, either buy the domain or you don't. A lot of times people aren't willing to help as much, but sometimes just by willing to help somebody and do the right thing, that it's amazing what comes back to you. And I think it's just fun to see where things can go from there.
No, that's good. Again, my brain went to real world real estate. Physical real estate, developing relationships with other brokers, referring deals, almost. Being able to partner and collaborate. Like, Yeah, that's such an interesting point. Like, hey, just get in there and make relationships and help and just yeah, interesting things can come from that when when you do that when that happens. All right, what are your thoughts? So tons of TLDs out there. So top level domains for people. So that's like the .com part is the TLD. If I just got that wrong, you can correct me. But like I think there's like 1,500 plus or something now, which is nutty. What's the growth of those that you've seen? And then like what's your opinion on all of the TLDs that exist today? Like what's your thinking there?
It's a lot of noise, that's for sure. I mean, like I said, I'm a late adopter when it comes to those things where it's like if they're brand new and sexy and everything, I'm like, that's all good and well, but if they're still kicking in 2 to 3 years, then I'll take a look at it. So for us, it's really about kind of the big, .com, I, .io, .co, .net, .org. Um, those are really the main ones that have just stood the test of time, essentially. And I think a lot of other ones that are out there, you'll see some big sales um, but they've got to be really specific. That the word to the left really has to make sense to the word to the right, right? So if it's down shop, um, and you really with those, if it's a non.com, the word to the left really has to be a good one word or really killer two word max.
Yeah.
Other than that, it's just not really gonna be sellable for the most part. I mean, sure, maybe 1 out of 1,000 might, have a random buyer, but you're not really gonna build a sustainable business. A lot of them have expensive renewals, so you gotta check that as well, but
Yep.
I think, again, if you're investing, money part-time, in doing this, you really gotta go with what you know is gonna work. Everything else is just really speculative. It's like playing the lottery. It's just, so I think, yeah, it's worth paying more for a better extension and a better name, kind of putting your eggs in something that may not ever come to fruition.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Not to it's interesting because if people that are interested in it, they get caught up on online. It is very neat to see sales. Like it's very interesting and fun to see the sales of domains. Um, but I made a random post where I don't even remember what the figure is, but it's if you do the combinations of basically what a potential domain could be and the TLDs, and you do the math on that, it's like literally near infinite possibilities for potential domains. The market's not that big, right? So, and even if you said like I don't know, 20 character domain, don't use numbers, whatever, it was still like in the trillions or something. So it's like it's to me that was a reminder to myself to be like, hey, these names matter. Like every purchase, even hey, even if it's a hand register name, like for me, I'm just treating it like every every name matters. So anyway, I just say that as a pointer for someone listening to be like, "Oh, I'm in. Let's do this. Let me start slinging money and buying names." Like that's great, but like there's more domains available for sure than will ever be used. I think that's just like mathematical like logic fact, you know.
Yeah.
All right, what do you think what do you think the problems like what are some problems in the industry or like where are some gaps? Like is there anything that comes to mind you're like, "Oh man, like this is what's needed to make it better," or this would help solve, this problem of whatever in the industry. Does anything come to mind?
Yeah, I think the biggest gap that we see information. So, for example, like people knowing why a domain name is valuable. I mean, I can't tell you how many, we manage a lot of incoming inbound on domains that we work and, on a, let's call it $100,000 domain name. Somebody will be like, they're max at 250 or $500 and their, company's doing really well in revenue. Like there's such a gap in terms of like, they're like, oh, I'll just go buy the dot buzz and that'll be fine. Well, why don't you play that out for a few years and see how building your brand on dot buzz is and the fact that nobody's going to remember the fact that, your emails are going to be going to spam because it's an odd extension. There's just a lack of credibility versus going to a premier domain, getting that automatic authority. I mean, that's the other thing too, is that you get automatic authority, especially with Generation Z, Generation X. I mean, there's an authority that comes with having a great domain name. Everything gets easier, the marketing gets easier, your marketing dollars go further. So there's just a gap in terms of like why people don't quite understand why a domain name is valuable and why they should be willing to, move mountains to try and buy, what would be the perfect domain for them if they have the opportunity. And that's the thing that we tell people all the time is like, look, some once a domain is sold, it may not be available forever for, another 20 years, you know. Like so for example, one of the things we sold Wasserman.com. So this guy was an accountant, like an older guy, and really needed to sell it pretty quick. Um, and there was one main buyer. We pitched it to a number of people, but Casey Wasserman, he's, you know, worth $500 million, and he's in charge of the 2028 Olympics and runs one of the largest sports agencies in the country, well, in the world, really. And so for Wasserman, that the guy needed six figures for it. Wasserman was max at like 10K. And I mean, here's a guy who would spend more on a watch than 10K, right? There was just a guy like, this is your last name. As a matter of fact, went into the research on this guy, Casey Wasserman is actually his mom's maiden name. So
Oh, wow.
her mom's family was generationally wealthy, but to keep your mom's maiden name means that name really means something. And the fact that you can be the guy that really locks that in for future generations. And so the way I was able to get them to come up is I said, well, think about it this way. Let's just say hypothetically the domain name was in your account today. And then let's say 2 weeks from now, I reach out to you and said, hey, I've got somebody interested in buying the domain name. What's the price you'd want for it? Right? Would it be 10x what you paid for it? Would it be go kick rocks? I'll never sell it. Would it be $10 million? What asset can you go buy that immediately has that much value as a domain name? And when people really start to think about it from that standpoint of like, hey, if this was yours, what would you want for it? Right. And that kind of fits the switch. I mean, kind of like with a house, for example, right? Like if you own this house and somebody wanted to come and buy it, you're not really going to be nickel and diamond over, closing cost or, hey, I want you to fix this window. Like, no, this is your house. So I think that's one thing in sales that I've learned tremendously over the years is that being able to put yourself in their shoes and really think about it from their standpoint helps you see it from all different angles. And all you need is that one little sliver, that one little way to kind of help them break through. So when you're able to have those conversations with people and get through and help them see that, it makes a difference. But there's a lot of people that need a lot of education on domain names. Like when you see rocket.com and the Super Bowl commercial. Nobody knows that they paid 14 million for that domain name. Nobody knows that they paid 30 million for, that whole Super Bowl ad and all the marketing and everything that went in it. So I think the education piece is a huge thing. So I think, the people like help a ton in terms of just giving more information to more people, helping them learn and understand why domains are valuable. I think but it's also tricky too, because a lot of times people don't want other people to know what they're paying for domain names, right? For multitude of reasons. So there is a privacy side to it that kind of prevents that education in terms of why people don't necessarily know what domains are selling for. But
Yeah.
I think that's probably the biggest gap.
Why do you think that gap exists? Like, so I wrote that down as something to potentially follow up with you on later, like in the future. But I wonder, like, why does that gap exist? I guess I feel like part of it, from my standpoint, or just my thoughts, why you explained all that, is potentially because the companies or the a potential buyer of a domain doesn't know to like seek that information. So there's not like necessarily a market for that information. Um, but on the education side, and use the word educate, because that's exactly like what you're having to do is like educate the value or how important that is, like that domain is. Um, do you think that's it? Like, is it because there's no like it's hard to I'm just gonna use the word monetize. Is it hard to monetize that information gap because there's no one to like that information, or is there another reason for that info gap? Do you think?
No, I mean, it would be like if you're at the grocery store walking out to your car and somebody comes up and says, "Hey, man, I'll give you $100 for your car." Like you would look at the guy like crazy. Like, no,
Yeah.
like people know that you can't just go buy a car for $100, but people think that way with domains. Just like if somebody came and knocked on my door and said, "Hey, man, I'll give you 15 grand right now for your house. I'll move in
Yeah.
today." Be like, what? Like, what planet are you in? So there's kind of that gap with domain names right now, and there is going to be a tipping point, absolutely. And I will say one of the biggest tipping points that I already saw in this business was when COVID happened, right? I mean, it
Mm.
was incredible to see how when the whole world shuts down, well, at least in, and people aren't going into stores, and how domain names became really important because, hey, your online presence is going to be how you're making money. And so that was a moment where, our outbound efforts became a lot more relevant because another tipping point, I think personally, is going to be as a lot of the C-level guys that are, baby boomers, as they're, because, a lot of these guys that are baby boomers, they've had a two-word domain with a dash in it for
Mm.
30 years. It served them well. It's just something they haven't really thought about. But as those C-level, as they retire, and the C-level guys are now maybe Generation X, Generation Y, Generation Z, where it's like, hey, this is going to be a no-brainer. So I think, time will help. I think as we see a changeover in C-levels at some of these larger companies, I think that will help. Uh, I think more, um, um, yeah, there's more information getting out there about domain sales. I think that's going to help. So I think it's going to be a slow process, but there will definitely come a point in time where people won't necessarily, like I said, come up to you and offer, $10 for, $100,000 domain name, because they're going to know.
Yeah, like, that has value, I understand it, it's common sense that it has value, so I'm not gonna, like, or at least if you do it, you're gonna know yourself that it's an extreme, ridiculous offer, maybe. Alright, earlier you mentioned, we were talking about, like, trends and some stuff like that. Um, do you like, and how you see trends kinda earlier than other people. Do you have any trends on your radar that see out into the future that, like, we should have in mind?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I think is going to become more and more important as is just being able to build personal brands. So I think people owning, their name.com, first name, last name.com.
Yep.
That's something that has an emotional attachment to people. It's something that, hey, regardless if you want to be a real estate agent, if you ever want to run for office, if you ever want to, start a blog or a podcast or whatever it may be, with NIL deals and sports and all these other avenues where people can really start to leverage themselves as a person as opposed to the company they work with. I think there's going to be tremendous opportunity there. Um, and I think that's something that people should really take note of now, is if, go ahead and secure that stuff. Get it for your kids, right? I mean, that was one of the first things I did when our kids were born, is like make sure
Uh-huh.
that I had their domains, and you just never know. I mean, my son, like I said, is using his for college applications, and hopefully for a lot more things down the road. It's just such a versatile asset to have. Yeah, so I think things like that that have meaning. I think, if there's something locally that is important to you in your city, I think there's opportunities there, like something where you can actually add value to it, right? So it's like, for example, if you go to buy a house, you're not necessarily looking to buy a house for like its current situation. You're kind of picturing your mind like, oh, what if we painted it this and we added this? And so kind of the same with a domain name of like, what are the things that you could do with it? Like, let's say you were to build a product or a brand or a service around this. What gets you excited? What are the avenues? What makes logical sense with it? And I think really start to kind of play it out a little bit with a domain and see, hey, where can this go? How would this have meaning for people?
Yeah, no, that's good, that's good. Okay, taboo to buy people's personal names as a domain investor or no? I do not own other people's names. I know people that buy names and sell names. What are your thoughts on that?
Buying other people's names?
Yeah, so if I buy John Smith, oh my gosh, johnsmith.com is available, and Brooks Conkle, should Brooks Conkle snag that and hold on to it and sell it to a I mean, there's obviously plenty of John Smiths out there. Is that a no-no? Is that frowned upon, or are you like, "Hey, man, it's business."
I mean, if it's a famous person, you've really got to be careful because, like I said, there's,
Mm.
kind of an inherent trademark protection around that as a known figure. But if it's a generic domain that you can get, like jonathanedwards.com, I mean, there's probably people with that name. So,
Exactly.
uh,
You probably sell it to one of them.
yeah. Uh, but I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say as an investment standpoint. I do think though, as like what I see the future being is that that will be something that people becomes more important to them. and they see the value in it.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's good. Okay. Uh, tips for folks getting started that maybe we didn't touch on, and is there anything you think I should have asked you I didn't in our chat?
Yeah, I would say just having a good strategy, like you said. I mean, one of the things I would say too is that make money on domains when you buy it. So if you just have a few beers and go start, getting harebrained ideas and things like that, that's one way to do it. That's not necessarily what I'd recommend. But if you do get those ideas, write them down and then research them the next day. Do some research on it. Say, hey, think about it from an end user perspective of like, hey, who would want to buy this? Why would they want to buy it? What would be my pitch to them? Would I price it at? What would be my ROI? So I think really that would be, one thing, just having a process for when you buy domains. I think getting a good community of people around you. There's some good forums like Name Pros. There's, I think going to a domain conference. I mean, they're pretty small conferences, but at the same time, what an incredible way to um, I've been going to domain conferences for a long time, and you definitely would learn a ton and meet some great people. Um, I think reading up on the UDRPs, there's a lot of great stuff on Domain Sherpa, like in the archives that I used to watch back in the day with Michael Seiger going through UDRPs and um, like I said, reading the forums, watching trends. Um, um, and then, yeah, I think like you said too, with Chat GPT, that's a great way to be able to simplify your research. I mean, now you can probably do research a lot quicker for domains than it would have been before. But I would say those would probably be some of the key things. There's some pretty good books out there as well, um, that are just helpful to learn kind of the industry as a whole.
No, yeah, there's a great I did not know that domain conferences existed until within this last year, and there's multiple of them, and I'm like, of course there should be conferences. There is a conference for every industry. Of course there's conferences for domaining. So that's cool. That's definitely cool. All right, man, I've enjoyed hanging out. If people want to link up or connect with Grit Brokerage, you guys, what's the way you would want people to find you guys?
Yeah, I'd say to go to gritbrokerage.com. I'd also say, so we do a biweekly podcast on our YouTube channel. It's at grit-org. So we interview entrepreneurs and athletes talking about grit, but we do also a quarterly show on there as well. We have like motivational, videos on there. But yeah, I'd say gritbrokerage.com and then grit.org.
Cool. Yeah, I'll make sure I link both of those up so folks can easily just click over and find you guys. But Brian, man, it's been great. I've enjoyed hanging out, and hopefully we get to do it again. Get to do it again soon.
Absolutely. Thanks, Brooks. Appreciate you.
All right.